The little girl couldn't have been more than 8, her bare feet bleeding through the dust as she approached his porch. Behind her, 3 smaller children huddled like frightened quail, their hollow eyes fixed on the bread cooling in his kitchen window. "Can you spare us bread, mister?" Thomas Garrett had seen plenty of desperate souls drift through his ranch over the years, but something about this child's steady gaze, no tears, no pleading, just quiet dignity wrapped in rags, struck him like a physical blow. Her siblings clung to her torn skirt, silent as ghosts. He'd been alone on this spread for 6 months now, ever since Martha's fever took her. The house felt too big, too quiet, filled with echoes of laughter that would never return. He'd grown comfortable in his solitude, finding peace in the routine of cattle and chores, the predictable rhythm of a life lived without complications. But these children changed everything with 5 simple words. "Where are your folks?" he asked, already knowing the answer from the way the girl's shoulders straightened, taking on a burden no child should carry. "Mama died birthing little Samuel here." She gestured to the infant wrapped in what looked like a flour sack. "Papa caught the fever last week. We've been walking since Tuesday, trying to reach our aunt in Millbrook." Millbrook was 60 miles east through dangerous territory. Thomas studied their faces, the girl's determined chin, the boy of maybe 6 swaying on his feet, the toddler who hadn't made a sound since they'd arrived. They wouldn't last another day on the trail. The bread wasn't the real question. He had plenty of food, plenty of space in the rambling house Martha had always hoped to fill with children of their own. The real question was whether a grieving widower had any business taking in 4 orphan souls when he could barely manage his own ghosts. But as he watched the little girl shift the baby to her other hip, her thin arms trembling with exhaustion, Thomas realized some decisions made themselves. Some crossroads appeared without warning, demanding an answer that would define what kind of man you really were. He opened the door wider and saw something flicker across the girl's face. Not relief, but something harder won, hope. "What's your name, child?" "Mary Catherine Walsh," she said, lifting her chin. "These are my brothers Johnny, Michael and baby Samuel." Thomas nodded slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs as he faced the choice that would either save them all or destroy everything he had left. "Come inside," Thomas heard himself say. "All of you." Mary Catherine hesitated, searching his face for deception or worse. In her short life she'd clearly learned that kindness often came with a price. But hunger won over caution, and she shepherded her siblings through the doorway into Martha's kitchen. The children stood frozen in the center of the room, afraid to touch anything, afraid to breathe too loud. Thomas watched Mary Catherine's eyes take inventory. The full pantry, the warm stove, the wooden table that could seat 8. Her expression revealed nothing, but her grip tightened protectively on baby Samuel. "You can eat your fill," Thomas said, slicing thick portions of bread and setting out butter, jam and cold milk. No strings attached, but even as he spoke, his mind raced with complications. 4 children meant 4 mouths to feed indefinitely. It meant schooling and clothing, and questions from neighbors who already whispered about the strange hermit grieving his dead wife. It meant responsibility for lives other than his own, a prospect that terrified him more than any stampede or storm. Johnny, the 6-year-old, reached tentatively for a slice of bread, then stopped and looked at his sister for permission. The careful hierarchy of survival they'd developed broke Thomas's heart. These weren't children anymore. They were refugees, hardened by loss and desperation. "Eat," Mary Catherine whispered, and they fell on the food with quiet desperation, trying to maintain dignity while their bodies betrayed their starvation. Thomas stepped onto the porch, needing air, needing space to think. Through the window, he watched Mary Catherine break her own bread into tiny pieces, feeding most of it to baby Samuel while pretending to eat. The gesture reminded him so sharply of Martha, always putting others first, that his throat tightened. His nearest neighbor, Ezra Holland, chose that moment to ride up the dusty lane. Ezra's eyes narrowed as he spotted the children through the window, and Thomas felt the weight of judgment before a word was spoken. "Taking in strays now, Thomas." Ezra's voice carried disapproval sharp as barbed wire. "You know what folks will say about a bachelor man housing young girls. Especially," he gestured vaguely at Mary Catherine, "she's getting to an age where it ain't proper." The implication hit Thomas like a slap. In Ezra's world, in most of their world, decency was measured by appearances, not actions. A man alone with children, especially a girl on the cusp of womanhood, would fuel gossip that could destroy reputations and lives. "What would you have me do?" Thomas asked quietly. "Let them starve, take them to town, let the church handle it, or find families who can. The church has no money and fewer resources than I do." Thomas's voice hardened. "And those families you mention, they want workers, not children to love." From inside came the soft murmur of Mary Catherine comforting baby Samuel, and Thomas realized his choice was already made. But as dust clouds appeared on the southern horizon, 3 riders approaching fast, he wondered if he'd have the chance to honor it. The riders wore badges, but that didn't ease the knot in Thomas's stomach as they reined in at his gate. Sheriff Coleman dismounted first, his face grim beneath his weathered hat. Behind him, Deputy Harris and a thin man in a black suit Thomas didn't recognize surveyed the ranch with calculating eyes. "Thomas," Sheriff Coleman nodded curtly. "Heard you might have some lost children here." Through the kitchen window, Thomas saw Mary Catherine press herself against the wall, gathering her siblings behind her like a human shield. Her face had gone pale, but her jaw was set with familiar determination. She'd clearly dealt with authorities before. "Children, yes, lost no." Thomas stepped forward, placing himself between the lawman and his porch. "They came asking for bread. I gave it to them." The man in the black suit stepped forward, producing an official-looking document from his coat. "I'm Reverend Blackwood from the Territorial Children's Aid Society. We've been tracking the Walsh children since their father's death. They need proper placement in Christian homes." "They have proper placement." The words left Thomas's mouth before he fully realized their implication. "Here," Sheriff Coleman's eyebrows rose. "Thomas, you're a single man. The law requires I do right by children in need." Thomas's voice carried an edge he hadn't used since his army days. "These kids aren't criminals or strays. They're orphans who asked for help." Reverend Blackwood's smile was thin and cold. "Mr. Garrett, I understand your charitable impulse, but we have proper Christian families willing to take these children. The girl especially needs female guidance as she approaches womanhood. Surely you can see the impropriety." "What I see," Thomas interrupted, "is a child who's kept her family alive through hell, and deserves better than to be separated from the only people she has left in this world." The baby's cry drifted from inside the house, and Mary Catherine's soothing voice followed. The sound seemed to soften something in Sheriff Coleman's expression, but Reverend Blackwood's face remained marble hard. "The Walsh children are wards of the territorial government," Blackwood said, his voice gaining authority. "I have legal custody and placement orders. The girl goes to the Morrison family in Tucson for domestic training. The boys will be apprenticed to various tradesmen. The infant will be placed with a family seeking adoption, separated." Thomas felt something cold and violent rise in his chest. "You'd split them up. It's for their own good. Children adapt, over my dead body." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Sheriff Coleman's hand drifted toward his weapon, and Thomas realized he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Behind him he heard the kitchen door open, and Mary Catherine's quiet footsteps on the porch boards. "Please," she said, her young voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. "Don't take my brothers." Blackwood's smile never wavered. "Child, you don't understand what's best for you. These arrangements have been made with your welfare in mind." Thomas saw Mary Catherine's face crumple for just an instant before she rebuilt her walls, and something inside him snapped completely. "Wait." Mary Catherine stepped forward, her chin raised in defiance that broke Thomas's heart. "If I go willing-like, will you let my brothers stay together?" The question hung between them like a blade. Thomas watched this child, This fierce, protective girl who'd already sacrificed everything for her siblings, prepared to sacrifice herself as well. The casual cruelty of it stole his breath. Mary Catherine, no. Johnny started forward, but she caught his hand. Hush now. Her voice was gentle, but Thomas heard the tears she was fighting. It'll be all right. Reverend Blackwood consulted his papers. The Morrison family specifically requested a girl of appropriate age for domestic training. If you come willingly, I suppose arrangements could be made to keep the boys in proximity, though separate placements would still be necessary. That's not keeping them together, Thomas said quietly. He knelt beside Mary Catherine, meeting her eyes at her level. You don't have to do this, child. No one's taking you anywhere you don't want to go. She studied his face with those two old eyes. You don't understand, mister. They got the law on their side. And you, her voice softened. You've been kind to us, but you don't owe us nothing. We ain't your responsibility. Thomas thought of Martha then, of the children they'd never had, of all the empty rooms in his house, and all the empty spaces in his heart. He thought of Mary Catherine breaking her bread into pieces to feed baby Samuel, of Johnny's careful politeness, even while starving, of little Michael who hadn't spoken a word, but whose eyes held depths of understanding no child should possess. You're wrong about that, he said softly. Reaching into his vest pocket, he pulled out Martha's wedding ring, the one thing he hadn't been able to put away, the one thing he carried everywhere like a talisman against forgetting. My wife and I, we always wanted children. She used to say that family wasn't about blood, but about choosing to love somebody every day, even when it's hard. He pressed the ring into Mary Catherine's small palm. She would have wanted you to have this, all of you, not because you need saving, but because, his throat tightened, because maybe we save each other. Mary Catherine stared at the simple gold band, then up at Thomas's face. For the first time since she'd arrived, tears spilled over her cheeks. But the law serves people, not the other way around. Thomas stood facing Blackwood and the sheriff with new resolve. I'm formally requesting guardianship of the Walsh children, all four of them, as a family. Sheriff Coleman shifted uncomfortably. Thomas, you know the process. Then let's follow the process. But until it's settled, these children stay here, together, where they're safe and wanted and fed. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring, filled with the weight of decisions that would shape 4 young lives, and one grieving man's chance at redemption. Reverend Blackwood's face darkened. This is highly irregular. A single man, no female supervision. I'll marry him. The words came from behind them, spoken in a clear, determined voice. Everyone turned to see Sarah Mitchell stepping down from her wagon, her teacher's satchel in one hand, and her chin set with familiar stubbornness. Thomas's heart stuttered as she approached, dust from her 20-mile ride still coating her simple blue dress. Sarah, he breathed, what are you doing here? Ezra Holland rode into town spouting nonsense about you harboring children improperly. Her eyes found Mary Catherine and softened. I came to see if you needed help. She turned to face Reverend Blackwood directly. If your concern is propriety, then it's easily solved. Thomas Garrett is a good man who's offering these children a home, with a wife to provide female guidance. I assume your objections disappear. Thomas stared at her. Sarah Mitchell, the school teacher who'd been Martha's closest friend, who'd sat with them through Martha's final illness, who'd quietly mourned alongside him without ever pressing for more. Sarah, who understood that some offers of love came not from passion, but from shared purpose. Sarah, you can't what? Her smile was gentle but determined. Can't choose to build something good from something broken. Can't believe that family comes in many forms. She gestured toward the children. Look at them, Thomas. They've already chosen you. The question is whether you're brave enough to choose them back. Mary Catherine stepped forward, still clutching Martha's ring. Miss, you don't have to. Child. Sarah knelt beside her. Do you know what I see when I look at you? I see a girl who's been carrying the world on her shoulders, who deserves the chance to just be young again. I see brothers who need their sister,
and a baby who needs his family. She looked up at Thomas. And I see a man who's been given a second chance at the thing he wanted most. Reverend Blackwood sputtered protests about proper procedures and waiting periods, but Sheriff Coleman was already removing his hat, a smile tugging at his weathered features. Well now, Reverend, seems like your concerns about propriety are about to be addressed. Thomas, you still want to file for guardianship? Yes. Thomas's voice was steady now, certain. All 4 children, as a family. The legal formalities took weeks, but that afternoon as they watched Blackwood's wagon disappear down the dusty road, Thomas felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of grief, a tentative stirring of hope. Sarah proved as good as her word. They married quietly 3 weeks later in the same church, where he'd buried Martha, with 4 children as witnesses and half the territory in attendance. Mary Catherine wore Martha's ring on a chain around her neck, a bridge between the family that was and the family that would be. Years later, when Mary Catherine was grown and married with children of her own, she would remember that first day differently, not as the day they'd begged for bread, but as the day they'd all come home. The ranch house that had echoed with loneliness filled with laughter and arguments, and the beautiful chaos of children growing up loved and safe. Thomas would live to see Johnny become a doctor, Michael a teacher like Sarah, and baby Samuel a rancher like himself. But perhaps his greatest pride was watching Mary Catherine become the woman Martha would have wanted her to be, strong and gentle, fierce in protection of those she loved, but never again carrying the world alone. The last photograph taken of Thomas Garrett showed him on his porch at 83, surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren, still wearing the quiet smile of a man who'd learned that sometimes salvation comes disguised as a hungry child asking for bread, and that the greatest courage is simply opening your door when love knocks.